this afternoon, and it says on the schedule that we're talking about CNS infections, but I may go ahead and talk about headache. I don't know. We'll see. It'll be one of the 3 Clin Med lectures I actually give today and tomorrow. Okay. There are 2 objectives here. So when you talk about the brainstem, knowing where the nuclei are and the interconnections is the important thing. And a collection of cell bodies outside of the central nervous system is a ganglion. A collection of cell bodies of neurons inside the central nervous system is typically referred to as a nucleus. So if these nuclei are defined for the most part, and they have a similar function. Before we get to the nuclei, let's look at the topography of the brainstem. The brainstem is divided into 3 general sections. From the bottom is the medulla. You may also know it as the medulla oblongata, but the medulla is good enough. Above the medulla is the pons, and above the pons is the mesencephalon, M-E-S-E-N, mesencephalon, also called the midbrain. If we go back down to the medulla, this is the ventral view. So we're looking at it from this side. You'll notice there are a couple of protuberances, and a protuberance on the brainstem or the brain usually means that there's a nucleus deep to it. So, or a large fiber tract, something is forming that, something of common function is forming that protuberance. So the first protuberance you see here is the pyramids. The right and left pyramids is an anterior medial fissure. And at the bottom of the pyramids down here, it's hard to make out. You can see what looks like little fibers that cross back and forth between the pyramids. That's called the pyramidal decussation. The pyramids contain the corticospinal tract. So the right and left corticospinal tracts are inside of there, and then right here is where they cross to the other side. So axons that are in here, headed for the spinal cord to drive motor function, cross into that side down here. So it makes a difference if you have a lesion, whether you're above or below the decussation, as far as which side is going to be affected. Okay? Moving laterally, there is a groove there. That groove is called the pre-olivary sulcus, which means behind it is going to be the olive. The olive contains a nucleus, the inferior olivary nucleus. And then behind the olive is the post-olivary sulcus. Now back in anatomy, we were doing brainstem. We took the brain out, and we were looking at the cranial nerves, and we were identifying all the cranial nerves going down here. I said, you really can't identify cranial nerves 9, 10, 11, 12 until we talk about them in neuro. Well, here's how you can identify them now. 12, the rootlets of cranial nerve 12 come out of the pre-olivary sulcus to form the hypoglossal nerve. Remember that the hypoglossal nucleus would be a column of cells just like you would see in the spinal cord when we're talking the ventral horn. Right? And in the post-olivary sulcus, from cranial to caudal, is where you'll find 9, 10, 11. So that's how you can identify them. At the pontomedullary junction is where you're going to find cranial nerve 7 and 8 laterally and 6 medially. pons is just a big globular mass containing pontine nuclei. We'll talk about those here in a little bit. There's a groove in the middle of the pons, and running in that groove, you'll find the basilar artery. Laterally in the pons, you see the trigeminal nerve rootlet coming out. Moving cranially to the pontomesencephalic junction. Right here in the midline, you see cranial nerve 3. Laterally, you're going to see cranial nerve 4. That's the only cranial nerve that comes from the dorsal aspect of the brainstem. You see these two large structures here in the mesencephalon called the cerebral peduncles. They're also called the crus cerebri. Between the two peduncles, there are these things that look like breast, hence the name mammillary bodies. The mammillary bodies are nuclei associated with the hypothalamus. So they're not part of the mesencephalon. So the mesencephalon really only goes right here. It's tiny. In front of the mammillary bodies, you'll see the stalk of the pituitary. And we'll get into that next week, as well as the mammillary bodies. On the dorsal aspect of the brainstem, you really can't see the dorsal aspect of the brainstem because the cerebellum is there. You can see here's the brainstem, there's the cerebellum attached to it right there. So in order to see the dorsal or posterior aspect, you have to remove the brainstem. Remove the cerebellum. So that's what this illustration shows over here. They've cut the connection from the brainstem to the cerebellum. Now there are 3 peduncles. The peduncle is just an attachment, a group of fibers that attach something. There are 3 peduncles on each side that attach the brainstem to the cerebellum. They're called just the superior, middle, and inferior cerebellar peduncles. Just leave it at that. There are 3 of them on each side that attach the brainstem to the cerebellum. We're going to cut through all 6 of those, as well as the membrane that closes this cavity here to remove the cerebellum. That cavity is the 4th ventricle. So if we go to this illustration right here and review the ventricles, these are the 2 lateral ventricles that drain into the 3rd ventricle, that drains through the cerebral aqueduct into the 4th ventricle. Cerebellum is the roof of the 4th ventricle. So we take it out, and there you go. Now, if you look at the different parts of the brainstem from the back, here is, if you say that the 4th ventricle is kind of like a diamond. If you draw a line across the points of the diamond, from about here down is medulla. From about here to the top is the pons, and then above that is the mesencephalon. So we start with the mesencephalon. There are 4 bumps in the mesencephalon: the superior and inferior colliculi. Superior colliculi and inferior colliculi. Generally, let me just tell you, the superior colliculi are involved in visual pathways. The inferior colliculi are involved in hearing, reflex pathways. You can see the fourth nerve right there exiting the posterior aspect of the brain stem. Okay? Not much is going on with the pons, but then you get down here and there are a whole bunch of bumps. When you review the medulla, you review, well, when anatomists or neuroanatomists look at the brainstem, they look at slices through the brainstem. What you see in a slice. And the slices through the medulla are taken in two places. One of them is up here in the fourth ventricle. That's called the open medulla. And the other slice would be taken down here. That's called the closed medulla. Right. By the way, going back to the pyramidal decussation on the front, that essentially is the, right here, that essentially is the demarcation between the medulla and the spinal cord. All right, now getting back to the dorsal aspect, right here there are 4 bumps on the back. The 2 medial ones are called the gracile tuberculum. And the 2 lateral ones are the cuneate tuberculum. Remember we were talking yesterday about dorsal columns, the gracile fasciculus, the cuneate fasciculus? So they go up, and they're going to synapse on second order sensory neurons, right? That's where they synapse. That bump, this is the gracile fasciculus, and that bump, the tuberculum, represents the gracile nucleus. It synapses there, and remember, it's the second order neuron that crosses the midline. So right here, right in here, you're going to have a sensory decussation. Because remember, they cross the middle. The second order crosses the midline to go to the VPL nucleus of the thalamus. Right. So let's look at a little bit of CSF flow. I mentioned there were 3 apertures in the fourth ventricle yesterday, or also in anatomy, where CSF leaves the ventricular system. Those are the 2 foramina of Luschka. So here is the, where, it's kind of hard to see here. Here's the brainstem right here. There's the fourth ventricle. There's the cerebellum. You see those 2 dark lines leading out. Those are the 2 foramina of Luschka. In the sagittal section here, the perfect sagittal section, here's the lateral ventricle. There's the third ventricle. There's the cerebral aqueduct. There's the fourth ventricle. There's the midline hole, aperture, as the foramen of Magendie. Or Magendie, wherever you're from. Okay? Now this illustration here is sort of a summative slide that gives you all of the nuclei, or most of the nuclei we're going to talk about. And the point I want to make here is, I made it a few minutes ago, I want to stress it again, is that a nucleus can either be one ball of cells in a certain place. So if you take a section through that certain place, you're going to get that nucleus. If you take a section just above it or below it, you won't get that nucleus. You can see these little balls of cells right here, the oculomotor nucleus, the trochlear nucleus. They're small. They don't do a whole lot. But there are other nuclei that are massive, that they extend beyond one specific level. The biggest one is the trigeminal tract and nucleus. And it extends all the way up from the mesencephalon all the way down into the upper cervical spinal cord. Now what that nucleus does is, think about it for a second. This is this is trigeminal, it's either gonna be sensory to the face or motor to the muscles of mastication, right? Motor to muscles of mastication, I would think would be rather small. And indeed, if you look at it, it is. Where is it? Trigeminal motor. It's a little bitty nucleus right there in the pons. But if you look at sensation of the face, what you have to do with sensation of the face, you have to cover pain, temperature, proprioception, touch, all those things. And you remember the homunculus, how big the face is in the sensory homunculus? There's an enormous amount of neural input. So you gotta have a big nucleus. So just think for just a second. What does that right there represent? What does it contain? What does that contain? Why is it so big? What does it contain? Anyway. Huh? Cell bodies of the sensory neurons associated with the trigeminal nerve. Okay? That's the answer. And now I ask you this. Are they first order or are they second order? They're second order. Where are the first order cell bodies? In the trigeminal ganglion. The trigeminal ganglion, the three ophthalmic, maxillary, mandibular, goes to the trigeminal ganglion. The central processes go in here. Remember, it's the second order that crosses the midline. The second order is in the CNS. All the first orders are out there in either the trigeminal ganglion or the dorsal root ganglion. So this big nucleus would contain the cell bodies of second order trigeminal sensory neurons. Okay? Now, I talked about the fourth ventricle continuing down into the central canal yesterday. Embryologically speaking, how in the world do you get this fourth ventricle? Well, in relation to the spinal cord, how do you get this fourth ventricle? Why does it come up and flare out to form the fourth ventricle? All right, so when you were a little bitty embryo, your nervous system was like this. Your palm, your medulla was like this. But then it split up here at the top and started to open up. So if I'm like this, here's the dorsal side of the nervous system, and here's the ventral side. It split and opened up like that. So when you split and open up, what happens is, in the structure of the spinal cord, the sensory is on the top, right? The motor is on the bottom. When you split and open up, what happens is the sensory part gets displaced laterally. So if I take a cross-section of the medulla, I can tell you that the motor nuclei are going to be towards the midline. The sensory nuclei are out in the periphery because of how this opens up. Okay? That's all that illustrates. How nuclei got from, or arranged from medial to lateral. If I have a picture on the exam and a nucleus in the midline, there's one motor nucleus in the choices and 3 sensory nuclei, it's going to be the motor nucleus.
The side that opens up, is that the dorsal side? Sorry.
Yeah, that's the dorsal side, huh? See, like if you were to just take a razor blade, cut right down through there,
Okay.
and peel it apart, the sensory part's going to be out laterally. Oh, okay. So here's the 2 sections we talked about. One through the open medulla, and one through the closed medulla. There's the level of the sections over there. So let's start with the lower section, the closed medulla. Here are the pyramids. There's the pyramidal decussation. On the top up there, you have the nucleus gracilis and the nucleus cuneatus. Because we're in the medulla, the spinal cord segments are now replaced with trigeminal nerve. So that's why you see the spinal nucleus of 5 is right there. You still have a spinothalamic tract and a corticospinal tract running through there because they've got to go up and down, right? So they provided you with the spinothalamic tract. They've got the ventral horn of C1 there. They got the ventral horn of C1. This is something going back to anatomy. Remember that C1 has no dorsal root. It's motor to the suboccipital triangle muscles. So it's C1. So right here is the transition between brainstem and spinal cord. We've got trigeminal nerve for the face and C1 for that little group of muscles there. Okay? We go up a little bit, section C there. Now we're in the open medulla. It's a little more complicated. We still have our pyramids. We're above the decussation. So if I lesion the pyramid there, I'm going to have an upper motor neuron lesion on the contralateral side. Understand that? It's an upper motor neuron lesion on the contralateral side because it crosses lower. Now, all of these second order neurons from the nucleus gracilis and cuneatus, they have to cross. Second orders cross. That's called the sensory decussation. I mentioned that. Once they decussate, so if we have all of these crossing sensory fibers from the gracile and cuneate nucleus, once they decussate, if they're decussating here, they line up in ascend like that. Right? This is a bad drawing, but all of these sensory fibers are going to decussate and then go up. Right? That's the thing. The pathway where they go up is called the medial lemniscus, and it's right there. So that medial lemniscus on your left side is coming from the right gracile and cuneate nucleus. If I lesion that, what's going to happen? If I lesion this side right there, let's call that the left side, what's going to happen? You will have a loss of touch, vibration, proprioception on the right. The whole right side. Because it's above the crossing. Make sense? There's actually remember the anterior, the anterior spinal artery supplies this. The posterior spinal arteries supply the lateral medulla, believe it or not. There's actually a syndrome called the anterior medullary syndrome versus the lateral medullary syndrome, because the anterior medullary syndrome would be a stroke of that anterior artery. It's going to affect the pyramids and touch because it's the medial lemniscus. The lateral medullary syndrome will get these nuclei out here, leaving the corticospinal tract of the pyramids in touch alone. That's how specific you can get with this. Okay, so here is our pre-olivary sulcus with the hypoglossal nerve coming out. If you follow that back, there's the hypoglossal nucleus. It's right there in the midline. It's the pre-olivary sulcus. That's the olive. The olive, the inferior olive, is a relay between higher centers and the cerebellum. We don't need to worry about it really now, but that's what it does, in case you're on Jeopardy. Abby. There's the post-olivary sulcus. What comes out the post-olivary sulcus? 9, 10, 11. You follow that back, and there's the dorsal motor nucleus right there of 10. The dorsal motor nucleus of 10. We'll get 9 and 11 here in just a minute. The motor nuclei, see, are medial. Now you get out get out laterally, you got to pick up another sensory nucleus. That sensory nucleus is called the solitary nucleus. The solitary nucleus is a relay for taste and autonomic sensory, or visceral afferents. Taste and visceral afferents. This label right there. Taste and visceral afferents. So, if I'm talking about the 10th cranial nerve, where are the taste buds of the 10th cranial nerve located? Posterior tongue, root of the tongue. That sensory information comes in, relays in the solitary nucleus, and from there, it's going to go up. Visceral afferents from the vagus, from your heart, your lungs, that's where they relay. Here's our spinal tract of 5, because that's going to be in just about every section we have in the brainstem. You're starting to pick up bits of 8 right here, because as you ascend, cranial nerve 8 sort of sits on the junction between the medulla and the pons. So you're going to get some cochlear nuclei, you're going to get some vestibular nuclei in that area. There's one more motor nucleus that we need to pay attention to, and that's called the nucleus ambiguus. And the reason it's called nucleus ambiguous is it doesn't have a nice, discrete, there it is. It's more haphazardly arranged. It's ambiguous. The nucleus ambiguous is a motor innervation to muscles of branchiomeric origin. Let me explain branchiomeric. I know you should have seen her face right here. She's just like, why did I ever decide to do this? I mean, I look on her face. Okay. Branchiomeric origin muscles are those that are derived from the branchial arches. They're not myotone muscles like the pectoralis and stuff. They come off of the arches. So the first arch gives rise to the mandible. The muscles that are associated with the mandible are the muscles of mastication, which are innervated by the 5th nerve, which means that the 5th nerve, well, there you go, you see what I mean? When you get down here and you start talking about, okay, well, what nucleus ambiguous motor supply is related to these lower cranial nerves? What's the motor, so what is innervated by 9, 10? Yeah, swallowing, your larynx, that's where they're innervated by. That's where it comes from. Okay? All right. Any questions about the medulla? If we look at some individual nerves, we saw 12, so now we're going to talk about 11. 11 is called the spinal accessory because it has two different nuclei that give rise to it. One of them is in the spinal cord, the cervical spinal cord, and the other is up in the medulla, which is the accessory nucleus. Those axons come together to form the spinal accessory nerve that goes to the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid. The 10th cranial nerve, and by the way, if you haven't figured it out already, this is what we're going to do over the next 12 hours, is we're going to go from 12 to 3. All right? So we're now down to 10. 10, vagus nerve, has 5 different functions. Has 5 different functions. We already know it does taste. We said taste to the root of the tongue. Where does taste come in? If this is the 10th nerve right here, taste comes into the solitary nucleus. It's going to synapse in the solitary nucleus. Here's taste right here. Visceral sensory from epiglottal taste buds. So you got visceral, apharynx, and taste. They're going into the solitary nucleus. 10th also drives your heart and lungs, right? So you got to have the dorsal motor nucleus of 10 is right there. That's what, that little thing is what drives your heart. The 10th nerve also has, so we've got taste, visceral apharynx, and visceral efferents. We got to have some somatic here with 10, because that's around your ear. That's why if you mess with your ear with cold water, you'll throw up. Okay, the vagus goes to your stomach, you'll throw up. There must be some relationship between your ear and sensation of the ear and the visceral. Well, yeah, because that also uses the spinal tract and nucleus. Up here somewhere. Right there. There's the spinal tract and nucleus right there. And the branchiomeric muscles, like your larynx and stuff, you've got to have that. And that comes out of ambiguous. So those are the nuclei associated with 10. Dorsal motor nucleus of 10, ambiguous, solitary, spinal tract of 5. Spinal tract and nucleus of 5. So 4 different nuclei. Because taste and visceral apharynx both go to the solitary nucleus. Okay? It's pretty complicated. And 9 does the same thing. There are 5 different components of 9. But the good thing is they're almost exactly the same. There's only one difference. The dorsal motor nucleus of 10 is visceral efferent. The visceral efferent nucleus of 9 is called the inferior salivatory nucleus. Inferior salivatory nucleus. Because what is the visceral efferent of 9? Oh my gosh, this goes way back to January. The what? Parasympathetics to what? Which gland? Which salivary gland? Parotid. That's where the preganglionics are located. The inferior salivatory nucleus. Hey, I got something for you here. What cranial nerve do you think is associated with the superior salivatory nucleus? What cranial nerve innervates the rest of the salivary glands? 7. There you go. It's just all perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. You just got to think about it for a second. Salivatory. Salivatory. They're either innervated by 7 or 9. If I told you that the inferior was 9, the superior is, I damn well better believe it's going to be 7. I hope it is. Okay? This is a summary I'm going to give you right now of all the cranial nerves and the nuclei. Okay? You'll see that some things, like the ambiguous nucleus, there are multiple cranial nerves that use that nucleus. The spinothalamic tract of 5, the nucleus of 5, uses 1, not only trigeminal, but 7, 9, and 10. We've already talked about 10 and 9 using it. Here's something you need to pay attention to. You know, when you have a stroke and you lose function over here on the right side or the left side, how is it that you don't, have you ever met, anybody seen a stroke person, your great grandpa or whatever? There are two things, two big things, that they never have problems with. One is their extraocular eye movement muscles. And the second is chewing. There are some other things, but those two things, they don't ever have a problem with. Why? Because here are the nuclei in the brainstem. If you'll notice, most of them receive a bilateral innervation from the cortex. You can stroke one side up here in the cortex, and that's okay. The other side supplies it too. So your tongue and your mouth, your muscles of mastication, being able to eat, are never affected in a stroke. The descending inputs to brainstem nuclei are called corticobulbar pathways, or tracts. So we've got corticospinal tract that does voluntary muscle movement, and these are corticobulbar. The 8th nucleus, so we did 12, we did 11, we did 10, we did 9, now we're at 8. I showed you the cochlear nucleus. We're going to deal with hearing next week, because hearing, we're going to deal with it at a higher level. Balance, though, the vestibular aspect, we're going to deal with today. There are a couple of things you need to know about the vestibular nuclei. There are 4 on each side. They're huge. You see them represented here as 4. The lateral vestibular nucleus is what gives rise to the vestibulospinal tract. The vestibulospinal tract goes down to modulate cervical motor neurons, or motor neurons in the cervical area that are going to neck muscles. Remember how I told you about her headband? She has a headband on today as well. So you being able to, this is where your head is in space. That's what the vestibular apparatus is. And all you need to do to worry about where your head is in space is run your neck muscles. You don't need the lower muscles because they don't operate your head. The other thing that comes out of the vestibular nucleus, though, is this thing right here called the MLF, the medial longitudinal fasciculus. Fasciculus is a bundle of fibers, and it goes up, and it connects the the vestibular nucleus with the 6 brainstem nuclei, the cranial nerve 6, 4, and 3. You see it right there. 6, 4, and 3. And that's the thing that I was illustrating the other day, is my neck is attached to my extraocular eye movement muscles when I can look at Allison's headband regardless of where my head is in space. If we go back to this thing right here, right there in the midline on each side, that's the MLF, medial longitudinal scales. There's a thing related to that. So, Allison, if I give you to lie down up here. Ron, you gotta come over here. We're gonna look at eyeballs. So what I want you to do is I want you to look up there. Now I'm gonna turn your head. And I want you to just smoothly, I want you to just let your eyes go over there. Okay? As smooth as you can, make them look over there to here. Okay? Here we go. Now watch what our eyes do. Now just look right there. I want you to smoothly, as I turn your head. What are our eyes doing? You're jumping, you're twitching. You cannot make your eyes smoothly go to the side. You can't do it. Only turn your head that way. Right? So I want you to make them smooth. Make them smooth. You can't do it. Okay, you can't do it. Now, why do her eyes do that? Because of this. Inside of these semicircular canals is fluid. So when I turn her head, can I see the water? That fluid stimulates hairs that deal with angular momentum. The hairs are connected to the vestibulocochlear nerve, or vestibular nerve. All right, so when I turn her head, it takes a second for the fluid to move. It's delayed. It's not instantaneous. That connection between the fluid in her eyes is via the MLF. Understand? And what do you think would happen? Well, let's do it. Come up here, Allison. Oh, let's pick on somebody else. Let's pick on Nathan. Come over here, Nathan. Have a seat right there. All right, now what I want you to do, I want you to sit down, I want you to start spinning. Okay? Spin back. Okay? So what are we doing with poor Nathan here? We're turning his head, turning his head, turning his head, turning his head, turning his head. So what do you think that fluid is going to finally do? It's going to finally do that, right? And when Nathan stops, what happens to the fluid? No, keep going, keep going. The fluid keeps moving. What do you think his eyes are going to do? Zoop, whoop, zoop, zoop, okay? So stop and stare at Allison.
No, they're going a little bit.
Yeah, if you do it, you give your thank you, then that's what will happen, right? That's the connection here. Now, what happens here, let's say you have a vessel inside your brainstem that bursts. You have a huge hemorrhagic bleed inside your brainstem that destroys, it is so massive it destroys this pathway. What do you think is going to happen if I take Allison's head and turn it down? It will track just like that. it's like her eyes are painted on, right? Like a doll's eyes. That's called the doll's eyes reflex. If you have doll's eyes, that means you have a massive brainstem injury. It's not a good thing. Okay? Just take a break and then we'll come back to this.